Dapat po munang alamin or matukoy ang pangunahing problema ng bansa upang mapagtuunan ng pansin at mabigyan ng solusyon.
We should have specific goals, do research, and make a policy that is fair for everyone.
Walang problema sa pulisiya. Iayos lang ang pagpapatupad.
Bago patubas ang batas, pag-aralan muna gusto ng government.
Two things, clarity and execution. Both, you need the communication and monitoring. As simple as that.
Mandato ng Philippine Institute for Development Studies o PIDS na gumawa ng mga pag-aaral at pananaliksik ng mga polisiya at programa ng pamahalaan at magbigay ng rekomendasyon sa mga mambabatas sa pagbabalangkas ng mga polisiyang makakatulong sa ating bansa. Sinusulong ng aming ahensya ang evidence-based policy making upang bigyan din ng kahalagahan ng polisiya na batay sa datos at policy research na sumusuri sa tunay na kalagayan ng ating mga komunidad. Napakahalaga ng policy research, lalo na sa mga panahong dumadaan sa krisis ang ating bansa.
Kapag pulisiya ay pinag-aralan, susulong ang bayan.
In need of references for your research? Do you want a digital library that you can access for free anytime and anywhere? You don't have to look far. SERP-P is here for you. SERP-P is an online database of socioeconomic materials produced by the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, government agencies, research and academic institutions, and international organizations based in the Philippines. It is the country's first online repository of socioeconomic information, created for policymakers and development practitioners, researchers, educators, and students. To access SERP-P, just visit the PIDS website and click the SERP-P widget under the Databases tab, or type serp-p.pids.gov.ph. SERP-P has a wide variety of materials such as journal articles, books, research papers, working papers, policy notes, audiovisual materials, and more. As of 2022, SERP-P has more than 60 partner institutions contributing knowledge resources to the database. SERP-P provides a comprehensive coverage of references encompassing 22 research themes: labor and education, gender and development, poverty, technology and innovation, trade and industry, and many more. On the enhanced website of SERP-P, you can filter your research by keyword or author, publication type, research theme, or year published, all at the same time. SERP-P has more than 7,000 publications and audiovisual materials that you can access and download for free. What are you waiting for? Visit SERP-P now. Socioeconomic Research Portal for the Philippines, innovating knowledge exchange and policy research.
So what is PIDS? For over 40 years, the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, or PIDS, has been the country's foremost socioeconomic think tank. It conducts rigorous and objective policy research and analyses that help the government in crafting relevant policies, plans, and programs in support of the country's long-term vision and development goals. PIDS pursues its mandate through three basic programs: research, dissemination, and outreach. Through its research program, PIDS identifies and prioritizes studies, develops proposals, and conducts research on priority areas. The results of these studies are then disseminated through different platforms, publications, online resources, PIDS Corner, seminars, and the Development Policy Research Month, or DPRM, held every September. To shed light on key policy issues, the advice and expertise of the Institute's research fellows are also sought by policymakers, government agencies, private sector, and civil society. Since 1977, PIDS has completed numerous policy studies on a wide range of development topics. This brand of service has then translated to policies and programs that have improved the lives of every Filipino. Philippine Institute for Development Studies, service through policy research.
Dapat po munang alamin or matukoy ang pangunahing problema ng bansa upang mapagtuunan ng pansin at mabigyan ng solusyon.
We should have specific goals, do research, and make a policy that is fair for everyone.
Walang problema sa pulisiya. Iayos lang ang pagpapatupad.
Bago patubas ang batas, pag-aralan muna gusto ng government.
Two things, clarity and execution. Both, you need the communication and monitoring. As simple as that.
Mandato ng Philippine Institute for Development Studies o PIDS na gumawa ng mga pag-aaral at pananaliksik ng mga polisiya at programa ng pamahalaan at magbigay ng rekomendasyon sa mga mambabatas sa pagbabalangkas ng mga polisiyang makakatulong sa ating bansa. Sinusulong ng aming ahensya ang evidence-based policy making upang bigyan din ng kahalagahan ng polisiya na batay sa datos at policy research na sumusuri sa tunay na kalagayan ng ating mga komunidad. Napakahalaga ng policy research, lalo na sa mga panahong dumadaan sa krisis ang ating bansa.
Kapag pulisiya ay pinag-aralan, susulong ang bayan.
In need of references for your research? Do you want a digital library that you can access for free anytime and anywhere? You don't have to look far. SERP-P is here for you. SERP-P is an online database of socioeconomic materials produced by the Philippine Institute for Development Studies. Government agencies, research and academic institutions, and international organizations based in the Philippines. It is the country's first online repository of socioeconomic information, created for policymakers and development practitioners, researchers, educators, and students. To access SERP-P, just visit the PIDS website and click the SERP-P widget under the Databases tab, or type serp-p.pids.gov.ph. SERP-P has a wide variety of materials such as journal articles, books, research papers, working papers, policy notes, audiovisual materials, and more. As of 2022, SERP-P has more than 60 partner institutions contributing knowledge resources to the database. SERP-P provides a comprehensive coverage of references encompassing 22 research themes: labor and education, gender and development, poverty, technology and innovation, trade and industry, and many more. On the enhanced website of SERP-P, you can filter your research by keyword or author, publication type, research theme, or year published, all at the same time. SERP-P has more than 7,000 publications and audiovisual materials that you can access and download for free. What are you waiting for? Visit SERP-P now. Socioeconomic research portal for the Philippines, innovating knowledge exchange and policy research.
So what is PIDS? For over 40 years, the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, or PIDS, has been the country's foremost socioeconomic think tank. It conducts rigorous and objective policy research and analyses that help the government in crafting relevant policies, plans, and programs in support of the country's long-term vision and development goals. PIDS pursues its mandate through three basic programs: research, dissemination, and outreach. Through its research program, PIDS identifies and prioritizes studies, develops proposals, and conducts research on priority areas. The results of these studies are then disseminated through different platforms, publications, online resources, PIDS Corner, seminars, and the Development Policy Research Month, or DPRM, held every September. To shed light on key policy issues, the advice and expertise of the Institute's research fellows are also sought by policymakers, government agencies, private sector, and civil society. Since 1977, PIDS has completed numerous policy studies on a wide range of development topics. This brand of service has then translated to policies and programs that have improved the lives of every Filipino. Philippine Institute for Development Studies, service through policy research.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our virtual forum on the theme, Breaking Barriers for a More Inclusive Future for Women. I'm Sheila Siar. I lead the Knowledge Dissemination Program of PIDS, which includes the Socioeconomic Research Portal for the Philippines Project, or SERP-P, which organized this morning's event with support from our Public Affairs Division. SERP-P is an initiative of PIDS that started 22 years ago to serve as a common link between the government and research institutions and provide an open access repository of socioeconomic information. Currently, the SERP-P network comprises more than 60 partner institutions, mostly from the government and academia, bonded by a shared passion for research and knowledge exchange. One of SERP-P's activities is this knowledge sharing webinar series, which features the studies of SERP-P partner institutions to stimulate public discourse on key development issues and promote evidence-based policymaking. For our third installment in this series, we put the spotlight on women in celebration of National Women's Month. Through the studies of our SERP-P partners, we'll tackle some of the obstacles that limit women's full economic and social participation and ways to address those challenges. To formally open our event, let us listen to PIDS President Aniceto Orbeta Jr. for his message. Sir?
Good morning, everyone. Let me start by acknowledging the following officials who took the time from their busy schedules to join us today. Technical Education Skills Development Authority Board Secretary Nit Aikal, Carigara Leyte Board Member Honorable Lorna Marapat, Zamboanga Peninsula Polytechnic University Gender and Development Officer Director Mary Faye de la Cruz, Philippine Institute of Environmental Planners, North Luzon Chapter President Milagros Rimando, Foundation for Sustainable Society Executive Director Sixto Donato Macasain, in Office of the Senator Francis Tolentino's Chief of Staff, Francisco Asli Asidilio. I would like to greet the various representatives from the government, academia, private sector, civil society, and media virtually present today, those watching through the PIDS and SERP-P Facebook pages. I welcome you to this virtual forum on the theme, Breaking Barriers for a More Inclusive Future for Women, organized by our Socioeconomic Research Portal for the Philippines Project, or SERP-P, in support of the National Women's Month. We are devoting this webinar as a venue to discuss the issues faced by the Philippine women and how we can address those challenges, guided by the studies conducted by our SERP-P partner institutions. Filipino women are often described as resilient, hardworking, and resourceful. Over the years, they have excelled in politics, business, science, and in the arts. However, like many women worldwide, they continue to face challenges such as gender-based violence, unequal pay, and limited access to economic opportunities. Women's economic empowerment is crucial in building a more progressive society. Aside from ensuring that women have equal access to education and employment, they must have access to entrepreneurship to increase their economic participation. Digital economy allows women to become economically productive, contributing to greater gender equality. A study conducted by PIDS finds women more likely than men to engage in online selling. Online platforms provide a livelihood opportunity, especially for women unable to participate in the economy due to responsibilities at home. E-commerce is a rapidly growing industry where women have many opportunities to start and grow their businesses. At the height of the pandemic, women turned to e-commerce to help their families cope with the devastating effects of COVID-19 crisis. According to the 2020 data of the Department of Trade and Industry, there was a dramatic spike in the registration of new online sellers from May to August 2020, brought by the stringent government lockdowns. Financial inclusion, a study by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, or PSP, found that women remain more financially included than men, which was the case across all financial products except investment. Regarding safety and security, a study commissioned by Thomson Reuters Foundation revealed that Manila ranks 10th among the cities in the world with most dangerous transport systems for women. United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and the Empowerment of Women, or UN Women, notes that violence in public places restricts women's and girls' freedom of movement, ability to participate in work, in school, in work, and public life, their access to essential services, and the enjoyment of cultural and recreational activities. Given these challenges, women continuously face this. That women continuously face. This morning's presentation will help us evaluate the obstacles limiting women's economic and social participation, of how they can create a more equitable, inclusive, and safe future for them. I want to thank the SERP-P partner institutions and the researchers present today who will share their studies. We have Ms. Jean Clarisse Carlos of the Philippine Apex Study Center Network and PIDS, and Mr. Jovito Katigbak of the Foreign Service Institute, Department of Foreign Affairs, who will present their analysis of the cross-border e-commerce environment of Filipino Filipino-led MSMEs. Meanwhile, Ms. Regina, Yvette, Romero of the Asian Institute of Management, Rizalino, Navarro Policy Center for Competitiveness will discuss the e-commerce participation of Filipino micro-entrepreneurs. Furthermore, Deputy Director Mynard Bryan of the PSP, Financial Inclusion Office, will discuss women's financial inclusion. Finally, Dr. Hazel Biana of De La Salle University Social Development Research Center will enlighten us about violence against women in urban public transportation. To all our SERP-P partners, thank you very much for your continued support, and to all the participants here in Zoom and Facebook Live, thank you for spending your Thursday morning with us. Let's participate in today's discussion with an open and inquiring mind. The American musician Frank Zappa provided a graphic simile of the mind, saying a mind is like a parachute. It doesn't work if it is not open. So don't hesitate to ask questions and share your ideas in the open forum. And I wish to emphasize that women's empowerment benefits not only women, but also their families, communities, and societies. When empowered, women can better contribute to their communities and country's economic, social, and political development. Hence, it should be pursued by everyone, regardless of gender. Thank you, and I'll give back the floor to our moderator, Sheila.
Thank you very much, Dr. Orbeta, for your insightful welcome message. At this point, may I invite Dr. Orbeta, our speakers, and our SERP-P coordinator, Zeki, for a photo opportunity. We'll be guided by our platform host, Mai Lagman. Mai, please.
Hi, morning, everyone. So I'm adding you to the stage via Spotlight. So I'd like to request all speakers to please turn on your videos. There you go. So ready. 3, 2, 1, live. All right. And then we'll also join the another shot, please. 3, 2, 1, smile. All right, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mai. Okay, I'm sure you're all excited to listen to the presentations. But to start the ball rolling, we'd like to hear from you first, our audience. Let's have a poll, a short poll, okay? Our forum focuses on breaking barriers for a more inclusive future for women. That's the theme. So in your opinion, what are the barriers or what are the obstacles limiting women's economic and social participation? So to answer, please click the Mentimeter link on the chat box. This poll, by the way, is also open to our viewers on Facebook, and you may give up to 3 answers, okay? So Mai, let's take a look at Menti for the results. I'm sure some of our participants have already entered their answers. Okay. Let's see the results on word cloud. Thank you very much. Okay, we have there. Okay, I think the topmost include education, and there's also discrimination, traditional mindset, domestic works, domestic work, stereotyping. We also have mobility, care work. What is that? A gender stereotype. Okay, intimidation. Okay, may mga nagsasagot pa ba? Sige, perhaps we can revisit Menti later, but I'm not sure if may sumasagot pa, Mai?
Ma'am, currently, I think meron pa po, but we
Meron
can
pa,
revisit
yeah.
later.
Yes, we can revisit them, our mentee later, and see if there are other, if there will be some changes in the results. But so far, in terms of the barriers in the opinion of our participants, the barriers limiting women's economic participation, the topmost on the screen is education. There's also a few others like opportunity discrimination, domestic work is also there, stereotyping, etc. Traditional mindset also figured in our results. Okay, so thank you very much for your participation. And just a few reminders on how to join the discussion, because we will start the presentations in a short while. So if you have questions, just use the Q&A button, not the chat box. And for our speakers, if you may respond by typing your answers, which will be visible to all the attendees. Alternatively, you can also answer the question live during the open forum. And for our live stream viewers on Facebook, please use the chat button for your questions. We will accommodate as many questions as possible that are relevant to the discussion during the open forum. Okay, so with that, let us now listen to the first presentation, and it is based on a PIDS study authored by Ms. Jean Carlos, Mr. Jovito Katigbak, and Ms. Jill Angeli Bacasmas. Ms. Carlos and Mr. Katigbak will be presenting the study. So Jean is a project development officer at the Philippine Institute for Development Studies and a senior lecturer at the Institute of Global Affairs and Diplomacy in Miriam College. She obtained her bachelor's in international studies from Miriam College and received her master's degree in public policy from Meiji University in Tokyo, Japan. And her research interests and recent publications are on gender, laboring, migration, innovation, and regional integration. Jovito or Tong, on the other hand, is a foreign affairs research specialist at the Center for International Relations and Strategic Studies of the Philippine Foreign Service Institute. He undertakes policy-oriented research and analysis on trade and development-related matters. He has published articles on ASEAN integration, Philippine trade policy, commerce, women-led MSMEs, and sustainable development, among others. Tong holds a Master of Arts in Development Policy and a Bachelor of Arts in Consular and Diplomatic Affairs from De La Salle University. Jean and Tong, you now have the virtual floor.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Siar, for that very kind introduction. So on behalf of my co-authors, Jovito and Jill, I would like to thank the SERP-P for inviting us to share the results of our study entitled Analysis of the Cross-Border E-Commerce Environment for Philippine Women-Led MSMEs, the Challenges and Opportunities. It is such an honor to be part of this knowledge-sharing forum in support of the National Women's Month with the theme, Breaking the Barriers for a More Inclusive Future for Women. This study builds on several key findings of our prior research entitled E-commerce Adoption and its impact on the performance of women-led MSMEs in Metro Manila, an ex-ante study for RCEP. So the study, which surveyed over 400 women-led MSMEs in Metro Manila, revealed dismal levels of awareness among women-led MSMEs of government programs aimed to support them, their participation in digital economy, and their expansion through cross-border trade. So the study likewise revealed that this lack of awareness translates into impediments to accessing key government programs and services. So as a follow-through to the study's policy recommendations, this presentation seeks to further elucidate from the government and policy makers' perspective the challenges concerning the enabling environment for women-led MSMEs. assess the conduciveness of the existing policy architecture for women-led MSMEs engaged in cross-border e-commerce, and provide actionable recommendation to address such challenges. So next slide, please. So hence, our presentation will be divided into 4 parts. So Jovito will be discussing the background of the study, related literature and methodology. Then I will present the data instrumentation, the SWOT analysis, and actionable points and ways forward. With this, I would like to turn over the virtual floor to Jovito. Tong, please.
Thank you so much, Jean. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, Tong.
Okay, thank you very much, Jean. And once again, thank you very much to PIDS and SERP-P for the invitation. We're really thrilled to share the results or findings of our study, which was released just last year, last December in 2022. Okay, just to set the stage for the succeeding sections of our presentation, the focus of our paper is basically about women-led micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises in the Philippines. And the background that we're seeing, or basically the stage that is currently happening, is that we're seeing women-led MSMEs at a crossroads in terms of developments in digitalization and international trade. The movements in the external environment, more specifically relating to free trade agreements as embodied by the RCEP, CPTPP, and even IPEF, presents opportunities as well as challenges and risks for women-led MSMEs in the Philippines. These FTAs, coupled with the adoption of e-commerce amid the COVID-19 pandemic, underscore the need to somehow survey the policy environment and determine challenges and opportunities for women-led MSMEs who'd like to participate and involve themselves in cross-border trade. Okay? The success of MSMEs is very important not only for the Philippines, but also for the APEC region because of its contribution to employment, to GDP, and a lot of other intangibles. By 2022, an estimated 20% of overall e-commerce will comprise cross-border e-commerce. Hence, the main objective of our paper is to basically contribute into the literature on cross-border e-commerce, specifically looking at the impact of certain changes or developments on MSMEs, specifically women-led. Okay? Hence, the question that I'd like to ask is, despite the opportunities afforded by the developments in cross-border trade and e-commerce, double MSMEs or women-led MSMEs face disproportionate and unnecessary challenges that prevent their increased participation in the digital economy. Hence, we have identified 3 main questions that we want to address in our paper. First is, does the Philippines have an enabling policy environment for WMSMEs to engage in cross-border e-commerce? Second, what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in the current policy environment, both at the national and regional levels, concerning women-led MSMEs in cross-border e-commerce? And of course, to contribute to the policy discussion, we would like to come up or outline policy options and recommendations or considerations encompassing women-led MSMEs engaged in cross-border e-commerce. Next slide, please. Now, to address the questions that I have just shared with you, we have identified 5 research objectives. First, and let me go through them briefly. The first is to basically adopt a toolkit or questionnaire on the women-owned businesses in the cross-border e-commerce. Okay? This was developed by one of the economies in the APEC region, and we adapted it to the Philippines setting. Second is map relevant stakeholders involving policy and decision makers concerned with policy making on women-led MSMEs and cross-border e-commerce in the Philippines. And then after we're done mapping, we have surveyed or examined the policy environment through the application of the toolkit, as well as through desk reviews and web scraping. Okay. After we have the findings and data, we apply the SWOT analysis to identify strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, which may prove to be very important in the country's path to empowering MSMEs, specifically those who are women-led, amidst amidst of post-COVID-19 recovery and the different developments. And last is, of course, recommend policy options and considerations for the Philippine government. Next slide, please. Okay. The focus of our paper is basically limited to women-led MSMEs and those that participate in e-commerce. And the definitions are, we base our definitions on those that are provided by relevant institutions or organizations. The authors only conducted KAIs with selected key stakeholders such as government agencies, business groups, and women's business organizations due to their participation and the activities in terms of the issue that we're looking at. And of course, one of the primary consideration when we did our study was basically this was the height of the transition after the May 2022 elections. So we have to, there are certain gaps that were filled by looking at data through web, through the internet. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, to somehow, familiarize ourselves with the issue and to gain more understanding on what has been, what are the different stakeholders doing, we divided the literature review into 4 parts. The first one is basically introducing the role of internationalization and digitalization for MSMEs to thrive in a very interconnected world. Internationalization is basically defined as a process by which enterprises expand beyond domestic markets to international markets and further participate in global value chain. Of course, digitalization has been instrumental in helping businesses internationalize. However, if you look at the experiences of MSMEs or micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises vis-a-vis e-commerce, they still face specific challenges, including trade finance, digital literacy, and e-payments, understanding e-commerce and digital trade regulations and logistics, discrimination on online platforms, online safety and security, networks, representation, and visibility. And so we also looked at how do these women-led MSMEs perceive government efforts, government programs. How do they view e-commerce? And we did this through our previous study, which is the foundation of our current study that we're presenting now. The findings of our previous study is that basically, in terms of financial inclusion and access, most women-led MSMEs express the need for financial assistance to sustain their businesses. We also asked them if they thought that the government gave enough information on financial aids, loans, e-banking, and e-payment. But majority of them responded that either they are not familiar with government programs or they don't have they don't have any idea at all. They also cited that they usually tap their personal savings for financial assistance and ask from their families and friends, and very few took from formal channels such as loans from banks and from government assistance. We also found that the women-led MSMEs lack awareness on government programs. Majority of them were not familiar and did not think that the government communicates its programs to the business sectors. They also express their desire for the government to provide more capacity building and training, more user-friendly digital platforms where they can obtain information on the programs, and access to financial assistance. And so this is important because later in the findings, we'll see if indeed programs are non-existent or is there a lack of communication on the end of the government. Okay. We also reviewed digital trade facilitation in the Asia-Pacific region, and digital trade facilitation is basically defined as the application of modern information and communication technologies to simplify and automate international trade procedures, which is very important to promote higher efficiency and cost savings, especially for businesses engaged in cross-border trade operations. At the global level, the the World Customs Organization has its Chapter 7 that provides that all customs processes shall apply ICTs to support operations. On the other hand, the World Trade Organization has come up with the Trade Facilitation Agreement that also perceives ICTs as means to make cross-border trade regulations more transparent. In the ASEAN region, we have the ASEAN single window, while in the Philippines, there's actually a lack of laws, there's lack of laws and regulations on cross-border transactions, mainly because countries are left on their own to legislate. Okay? Nevertheless, a study by Kimba et al. And Kigba and others, 2021, assessed the Philippines' readiness for regional trade integration with the Asia Pacific using the RDTII. Using the framework, they found that the Philippines have a relatively open digital trade environment, and they perform best in three pillars: tariffs and trade defense measures, cross-border data policies, and intermediary liability and content access. Okay? In terms of the frameworks at the regional and national levels, APEC has come up with a cross-border e-commerce facilitation framework, while ASEAN has launched a vision for cross-border e-commerce report. In the Philippines, the DTI released an update to the 2016 to 2020 Philippine e-commerce roadmap, and it is named as Basta E-commerce Madali. Madali stands for Market Access, Digitalization, and Logistics Integration. In achieving the vision of trying to streamline and mainstream e-commerce, the Philippine government has identified three important points of intervention: speed, security, and structure. And so all of this are basically important foundations into understanding the challenges faced by MSMEs and identifying opportunities. Now, in terms of our methodology, next slide, please. In terms of our methodology, we opted to do qualitative research to collect, describe, and analyze data obtained from both first-hand and secondary data. The first-hand data was collected through key informant interviews with relevant stakeholders that we map, and the specific number are 10 government agencies and 3 e-commerce and export-oriented women's advocacy groups and business association. However, some of them were not able to participate because of the ongoing transitions. Hence, we, as I mentioned, we filled the gap through web scraping or through secondary data. And so, to share the meat of our paper, I will now turn over the floor to Jean, and we look forward to your questions later. Thank you very much, Jean. You now have the floor.
Thank you so much, Jovito. So for the data instrumentation and collection, we utilize the toolkit developed by the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC, and the United States Agency for International Development, entitled Women-Owned Businesses in Cross-Border E-Commerce, a diagnostic toolkit published in 2020. The toolkit was designed to help the APEC community better understand the impediments of competitiveness and growth for women-led e-commerce businesses when trading within economies and across borders. Next slide, please. So in addition to Jovito's discussion of the research methodology, we conducted virtual semi-structured interviews and the administration of questionnaire to the following respondents flash on the screen. And it took place between August to October 2022. So the objective of the interviews and the questionnaire were to identify the gaps in the policy support for women-led MSMEs that are already engaging in or are ready for cross-border e-commerce. So the goals are to enable policymakers to consider what actions they can take within each issue area and points to areas of collaboration with private sector players, including entrepreneurs and trade support organizations, on creating a strong ecosystem of support for women-led MSMEs. So apart from the identified respondents, the authors also collated the data from the leading e-commerce platforms in the Philippines. So the authors adopted the toolkit and tailored the questionnaire based on the Philippine setting and was clustered into 8 major categories. First one is on data on women and e-commerce. Second is on the trade finance. The third is on digital literacy, e-payments, e-commerce, and digital trade regulations. The fourth category is the discrimination on online platforms. The fifth is the online safety and security. The sixth part is the networks, representation, and visibility. The seventh part is the trade facilitation agreement, and the last part is on logistics and customs duties. So the essence of these questions have nonetheless remained the same. The questionnaire allowed the authors to glean information on each of the 8 areas of the toolkit, which were subsequently analyzed through a SWOT framework. So the authors also afforded respondents leeway to provide personal insights and anecdotes, which were also subjected to further validation through data scraping and desk reviews. So the adopted toolkit, as used for this research, recognizes the complex interaction and synergies between public and private sectors, particularly insofar as the implementation of government programs for businesses is concerned. While the original diagnostic toolkit was primarily targeted towards selected government agency and policymakers, so the author acknowledged that some of the questions contained therein are better informed by the insight of these agency partners and collaboration in the private sector. So hence, the authors have adopted the toolkit to also accommodate the inputs of business groups and women trade associations. So this approach provided a more holistic picture of the ecosystem within the MSMEs operates. So next slide, please. So using the diagnostic toolkit and the SWOT analysis, it can be observed that the cross-border e-commerce environment is promising under 1, the network's representation and visibility, and the second is on digital literacy, e-payments, e-commerce, and digital trade regulations. However, there are areas for improvement such as in digital literacy, e-payments, and e-commerce, and digital trade regulations, discrimination on online platforms, and trade facilitation agreement, and lastly, on logistics and customs duties. So I will just briefly go through the results of each category. So on data on women and e-commerce, it poses both a strength and weakness. So most government agencies collect and store sex disaggregated data to formulate reports and design their respective interventions. However, they have yet to address and mitigate the challenges of collecting and processing data on women-led MSMEs and cross-border e-commerce trade effectively and accurately. So for instance, government agencies utilize different mechanisms with varying levels of sophistication for collection and storage. This has made aggregating data for devising policies and programs for women-led MSMEs on a wider scale more challenging. Hence, policies concerning on data on women and e-commerce would benefit from enhanced coordination and information sharing across agencies and between public and private sectors. Second, while shortcomings in trade finance are evident due to inadequate access to government financial institutions and microfinance institutions among women-led MSMEs in the informal economy, it is worth noting that various forms of financial assistance and lending options are available. Still, most are not specific to the needs of women-led MSMEs. Thus, the private sector players such as e-commerce platforms and fintech companies play an increasing important role in bolstering government programs for women-led MSME through their own trade financing schemes and modalities. So, under the digital literacy, as evidenced by the need to enhance the country's existing information and communications technology infrastructure, is a complex issue affecting not only the women-led MSMEs, but also other sectors of the economy. Although limited in the scope, its strength lies in the robust portfolio of the programs for women entrepreneurs, which currently exist in partnership with local, regional, and international stakeholders. As this is an issue area that figures high on the government's development agenda, the study finds vast opportunities for women-led MSME in terms of capacity building on digitalization and e-commerce. This can be realized through collaborative engagement between and among government agency, women business organization, and e-commerce platforms. Next would be the enactment of the Safe Spaces Act is a positive development insofar as discrimination and online safety and security for women MSMEs is concerned. However, many government agencies do not have enough data and dedicated formal mechanism to address cyberbullying and online sexual harassment in the context of online business transactions. So on networks, representation, and visibility, while it has been noted that women in general may lack a voice in governance and decision-making structures, the government's push for active participation of women business organizations in private sector consultation with APEC and ASEAN. So it is nonetheless commendable and should be sustained. In the foreseeable future, this may also include women MSMEs representatives' participation in the National Trade Facilitation Committee, where they can advocate for their needs as the government prioritizes trade facilitation reforms and negotiates provision in free trade agreements. Finally, under the logistics and custom duties, as a pain point for businesses, including women, poses a threat to women-led MSME who may be incentivized to compete internationally and limit their businesses to local markets instead. Opportunities through better coordination among government agencies to harmonize MSME support by promoting initiatives that encourage women and youth entrepreneurship can be explored. So next slide, please. So given the dynamic policy environment and passionate advocacy for women-led MSMEs and cross-border e-commerce, so the authors propose the following key policy options and consideration concerning women-led MSMEs. First is to improve coordination within and across government agencies, between government agencies and business organizations, and among government agencies and their stakeholders. So vibrant partnerships exist between and among government agencies, leading e-commerce platforms, women in business-centered association or organization, and fintech and other digital platforms. These partnerships may be more effective and institutionalized through a board, for example, like a technical board for APEC matters, that convenes quarterly and serve as a platform for information dissemination, dialogue, and collaboration. So this board will be paramount in formulating strategies and action plans, resolving issues, and responding to persistent and novel threats. So creating a national repository containing capacity building and other programs and policies focusing on women-led MSMEs in cross-border e-commerce must be also considered. Next, enhance women-led MSMEs access to programs, infrastructure, financing, and capacity building and other opportunities. So despite the continuous and comprehensive efforts by various stakeholders, access is a primary challenge faced by women-led MSME. More specifically, women-led businesses have difficulties connecting to the internet, securing loans and funding for their operating costs and future expansion, processing information and procedures on cross-border trade, and participating in government-led programs. Hence, the underlying issues including their awareness and their nature of their business is informal. That substantially contribute to the women-led MSMEs' low level of access to many services and programs must be addressed. So the third, as a result, in relation to the result of the Metimeter, so we also advise to educate women-led MSMEs on the government's policies and programs affecting their businesses. So two main barriers to access are the lack of understanding of the government programs and policies and the rampancy of informality among women-led MSMEs. So the study by Bacasma et al. In 2022 revealed that many women-led MSMEs in e-commerce businesses in the Philippines were only established during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Correspondingly, this may explain the low awareness among women-led MSME of government programs supporting their internationalization through cross-border trade and their hesitancy to register formally. So since most are in nascent stages and hesitant to set up their businesses informally and pay taxes, women-led MSME have opted to stay informal. For its part, the Philippine Trade Training Center or PTTC offers several courses encompassing operations, procurement, marketing, and finance, to name a few. So it also has training programs for women-led MSMEs in various stages of businesses. For example, startup, growth, maturity, renewal, or decline. So the Department of Trade and Industry, or DTI also has several projects like Go Negosyo to help businesses to register. However, most programs and databases only contain registered MSMEs. Thus, concerned government agencies should intensify campaigns and project seeking to assist women-led MSMEs move from the informal to the formal sector. Next would be provide capacity building for e-commerce adoption, scaling up and cross-border opportunities, and adhering to the custom-related procedures. So education and skills are key factors in capacitating women-led MSME to sustain their businesses and participate in cross-border trade effectively. Notably, although the PTTC supports businesses through its capacity building programs that range from e-commerce adoption to export promotion, it has no particular activities for women-led enterprises. Thus, PTTC may consider developing a more gender-specific training programs to address the unique needs and demands for women. Next is help women-led MSMEs scale up and sustain their businesses. So women-led MSME were established in response to the movement restriction caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Hence, there is a need to acknowledge that financing, infrastructure, implementation of programs, and other assistance are necessary for women-led MSMEs to sustain and scale up their future operations. Thus, mainstreaming access to these services and programs and enhancing coordination among stakeholders could help women-led MSMEs engage in cross-border trade. So lastly, if it's not included in this, right, it's the general promote gender equity. So everyone, regardless of gender, should have equal opportunity to participate in the cross-border e-commerce. In the Philippines, gender-specific issues have persisted despite policies and programs supporting MSMEs. So according to several respondents, most government programs are not gender-specific. Since men and women face unique challenges, a one-size-fits-all program does not always yield to positive results. Therefore, a collection of sex disaggregated data must be strengthened to effectively develop targeted programs benefiting women-led MSMEs engaged in cross-border e-commerce. So this is my last slide. So in conclusion, regional and national policy landscapes have put utmost interest in promoting and fostering an enabling environment for women-led and MSMEs and digitalization. So the Philippines policy landscape exhibits strengths in two primary fields. The first one is in networks, representation, and visibility, as well as in digital literacy, e-payments, e-commerce, and trade regulation. Conversely, the current national framework reveals weaknesses in areas such as online discrimination, trade facilitation, and logistics and custom duties. So likewise, policy gaps must be addressed in several areas such as public-private sector coordination and women-led MSMEs' lack of access to finance and capacity building programs, low awareness of the government policies and programs due to informality, and challenges in scaling up and sustaining their participation in e-commerce. So thank you very much for your attention. So in case you have further questions related to our presentation, please feel free to type them on the Q&A, or you may check out our publications published on the PIDS website. So the link is up there. So thank you so much again.
Thank you very much, Tong and Jean, for that comprehensive presentation. So friends, we will continue the conversation on Filipino women micro entrepreneurs, those involved in the digital economy or in e-commerce, particularly MSMEs. Okay, and for our next presentation, our author will present on her analysis on the e-commerce participation of Filipino women micro-entrepreneurs. And to present the study is Ms. Regina Yvette Romero. Regina is a research associate at the Asian Institute of Management, Rizalino as Navarro Policy Center for Competitiveness. Her research portfolio includes small business development, public health policy, social protection, and agricultural development. Before joining the AIM, she served as a legislative researcher at the House of Representatives of the Philippines, and she was also a research analyst at the National Defense College of the Philippines. She obtained her Bachelor of Science in Economics degree from the University of the Philippines, Diliman in 2020. Regina, the floor is now yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shar. I'll share my screen first. So a pleasant morning to everyone. I am Regina Yvette Romero, Research Associate from the Asian Institute of Management, Rizalino S. Navarro, Policy Center for Competitiveness. And today I will be presenting our study, Understanding E-commerce Participation of Filipino Women Micro-Entrepreneurs. I am certain that everyone, if not most of us here, have scrolled through our social media platforms and come across online sellers who are advertising their products through live selling. Such strategy has been effective in showcasing micro, small, and medium enterprises or MSMEs, as well as their products and services. These MSMEs have significantly contributed to the development of societies with their role in job creation, poverty and inequality reduction, and the formation of industries in underdeveloped areas. In the case of women, it has become an avenue for generating income and supporting their families. But despite the sector's significant contribution to economic growth, enterprises have yet to implement new tactics, particularly integrating digital technologies into their operations. The baseline survey on the degree of digitalization of 400 MSMEs, spearheaded by the Department of Trade and Industry, revealed a relatively low level of digitalization among the respondents, with 23% not utilizing any information and communications technologies, or ICT, in their enterprises. The results also showed that 51% are only utilizing basic tools like Microsoft Office, computers, and electronic mail. So to improve the business performance and competitiveness of firms, it is essential to adopt new digital strategies. And one of the strategies being maximized nowadays is the utilization of e-commerce platforms. The e-commerce market volume has continued expanding since the COVID-19 pandemic. According to the report of Google, Temasek, and Bain in 2021, the e-commerce market volume of the Philippines increased from $3 billion in 2019 to $12 billion in 2021. It is also expected to increase to $26 billion in 2025. E-commerce could be an opportunity for female business owners to increase their access to markets in industry that are usually dominated by men. And according to the recent report of the International Finance Corporation, women are active participants of e-commerce, and they are more likely to venture into e-commerce to grow their current enterprises than men. So the recent report also revealed that the advantages of e-commerce participation mentioned by women entrepreneurs are having more flexibility in schedule, being able to reach their personal goals, and being able to meet their basic needs. While women entrepreneurs have recognized these benefits, the utilization of the technology in their businesses has not been completely realized. Also, the experience of women engaging in e-commerce, particularly in developing regions like Southeast Asia, has not been explored extensively. So with this, our center explored the engagement of women micro-entrepreneurs in e-commerce by studying their entrepreneurial motivations, business operations, and resources mobilized in executing and managing e-commerce. We also identify the challenges they are facing while engaging in e-commerce activities, as well as their business prospects. Lastly, policy recommendations to further increase the participation of women in e-commerce were also suggested. So to make the study possible, the research team conducted an in-depth online interviews with 17 women micro-entrepreneurs around November to December 2020 via Zoom teleconferencing. So we employed a purposive sampling technique to ensure that the interviewees satisfied the following criteria. First, women aged 19 to 50 years old residing in National Capital Region or Calabarzon. Second, owners of enterprises with in-depth knowledge of their businesses and involved in managing its operations and finances. Third, engage in e-commerce. And fourth, their firms are micro enterprises or the firms having less than 10 employees. We also used micro-level qualitative data in the form of narratives and stories told to investigate the phenomenon. And lastly, to identify the bricolage behavior among women micro-entrepreneurs using categories from the definition of bricolage by Ted Baker and Reed Nelson, our team used deductive approach. So majority of the respondents of our study are engaged in wholesale and retail trade. They sell various merchandises such as ready-to-wear clothes, bed sheets, and towels, bags, beauty products, gadgets, fan-based items, and other accessories. And some also are selling ready-to-eat food items, while only one respondent is engaged in service industry, particularly doing different beauty care services. Most of the respondents of our study both conceptualized and engaged in e-commerce either during pre-pandemic or during the pandemic, while only 3 respondents have already conceptualized their business prior to the health crisis and then shifted to e-commerce operation when the pandemic hit. So now we proceed to the findings of our study. In terms of motives, most respondents start their businesses to augment their family's income. They often express their desire to assist their husbands or family members like their parents or grandparents or siblings in fulfilling the needs of the family. So since most of the respondents have children, they consider their needs and their future. So aside from augmenting the family's income, some respondents also mentioned of perceiving their businesses as an opportunity to pursue their hobby or their passion, while at the same time allowing them to earn extra income. Meanwhile, only a few mentioned that they venture into businesses mainly to serve as leisure or pursue their passion. In terms of their operations, business operations using e-commerce, almost all respondents mentioned of using Facebook in their in selling their products and services. So they use its live streaming function, My Day feature, marketplace, and community groups. And some respondents do live streaming on Facebook to showcase their products. According to them, live selling typically lasts from 5 to 6 hours. And to have a wider reach of audience, they either post links to Facebook community groups or announcing the schedule of their streams on their pages. So they also make their live selling more engaging by talking to their customers in a casual and fun manner and incorporating freebies or games to attract more viewers. Almost all respondents do Facebook postings of their products and services and share links via their personal Facebook accounts, business account, marketplace, community groups, and chat groups. So they employ this so-called quote-unquote power posting or constant and active posting and link sharing of items on Facebook. So with that, they are able to expand their customer reach. Their customers typically interact with them via the comment section of their posts or through direct message for other inquiries. So seeing this, it is no surprise that Facebook has been widely used by entrepreneurs in showcasing their products, as it has been the most used platform in the country. But aside from Facebook, some respondents also use e-commerce shopping platforms like Shopee and Lazada. According to a respondent, while her products are mostly available in her Facebook page, the checkout will be through her Shopee account since Shopee has quote-unquote lowered delivery fees. And on the other hand, such platforms also serve as complements to their Facebook postings. Meanwhile, only a few responded mention of posting their products on other platforms like Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok. A common characteristic among women entrepreneurs is their manifested bricolage behavior in adopting and managing e-commerce activities. But what is this so-called quote-unquote bricolage activities or bricolage behavior? So bricolage is a concept derived from the French word do it yourself. It is a mechanism for businesses and for innovative performance in resource-constrained environments characterized by making do with resources at hand, improvising and combining or reusing resources for new purposes. So the authors, as we use the criteria linked to the three components of the definition of bricolage adopted from the study of Ted Baker and Reed Nelson, which are first, making do or active engagement with challenges and opportunities. Second, combining resources for new purposes. And lastly, using resources at hand to examine the behavior of women entrepreneurs and their participation in e-commerce activity. In the study, the most frequently bricoled inputs are knowledge, human, and physical resources. Many respondents obtained technical and professional information in managing their businesses, especially their e-commerce operation, through their immediate social networks like their family members and friends. For example, one respondent said that it was her children who taught her how to post and sell products on Facebook. She admitted that she was not well versed in using gadgets, thus she sought the help of her children in managing the e-commerce operations. From here, we can identify that the entrepreneur actively engaged with the issue of not being a tech savvy by seeking the help of her children, which is a close family member. So this is an example of bricolage behavior. On the other hand, respondents also acquired information through social media platforms, which is another resource within reach, at least for the respondents. For example, two respondents stated that through YouTube, they obtained relevant information on how to start an e-commerce business and how to create and use online selling platforms. Some also mentioned that it was their previous work experience which made them knowledgeable in doing business. In terms of human resources, all respondents mentioned of having their family members and friends helping them manage their e-commerce operations. Several respondents mentioned that their husband or partner also helped them operate their business by sourcing suppliers, sorting, packing, and delivering products. A few respondents also mentioned that their children are often tasked to assist them in during their live selling, posting their products on Facebook, or managing their Shopee and Lazada accounts. So from here, we can observe that they did not employ other people, but mostly their close or immediate social network, which is an example of a bricolage behavior. Most respondents used their personal equipment when they were just starting out their business and then eventually invested on buying equipment and other needed materials intended for the business. So, for example, one respondent recalled that before she did not have an oven to steam her products. So she just made use of their gas stove for steaming. So now that her business has grown, she was able to buy small electric oven as well as other baking equipment. Several respondents also mentioned of using their houses as storage facility and location for their live stream. Merchandises of several respondents are also available physically or displayed in their houses. Lastly, in terms of financial resources, only a few use their savings, their husband salaries, or other family members' money as their startup capital. So to recap, from here, we can observe that women entrepreneurs made do or repurposed or combined their resources at hand at zero or low cost. So moving on from going to the perceived benefits and using e-commerce, respondents often mention that through social media, they're able to expand their customer base, promote their products faster and more efficiently, transact with their customers and suppliers more efficiently, and save costs more since e-commerce operation have lesser operational expenses compared to a physical store. They also mentioned having a flexible work schedule because of e-commerce. Moreover, when asked regarding the sources of their sales, most respondents mentioned of getting a large chunk of their sales from their e-commerce activities. Despite the success of these women entrepreneurs, they still face issues as they engage in e-commerce platforms. They mentioned that they are dealing with tight market competition given that their market is saturated already and physical establishments have opened as restrictions eased up. However, to overcome this, they employ power posting strategies, make their online live selling more fun and interactive, giving freebies and discounted products and lower their product prices. On the other hand, they also deal with bogus customers, or what they call quote-unquote joy miners, which lead to missed opportunity to sell the product. They also deal with irate customers, trolls, or haters, which can be interpreted as or form of cyberbullying. So to combat these problems, they are double-checking online accounts before transacting with them. And lastly, they mentioned dealing with slow internet connectivity as well as technical problems with e-commerce platforms. While they deal with these issues, women entrepreneurs also dream of improving their businesses in the future. Many respondents mentioned of establishing or expanding their physical store, while at the same time maintaining their e-commerce platforms. Some also intend to expand their product selection and increase their manpower. Others also mentioned upgrading their equipment and venturing into exporting. So to assist them in achieving their business aspirations, a more targeted support for women entrepreneurs as they expand their businesses online is needed. So government assistance should go beyond merely granting access to resources to help develop their businesses. Having a better grasp of factors affecting their making do attitude is essential in creating support measures for female entrepreneurs in relation to what resources they want to access. While recognizing the importance of bricolage behavior, active support to those women who are in this stage is important, especially in terms of assisting them in upscaling their enterprises, especially from progressing to formal approach. Moreover, upskilling and support to have safe spaces online are also important. On the other hand, it is also important to strike the right balance in regulating micro enterprises, particularly when it comes to regulating taxes and securing business permits, as these may hinder in starting or continuing their enterprises. Lastly, it is important to develop the country's ICT infrastructure, as this could positively affect the e-commerce operations of these women micro-entrepreneurs. Filipino women entrepreneurs have a huge potential to thrive in the digital economy. And with targeted policies and continuous support, they will further realize their entrepreneurial and personal success. So that concludes my presentation, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Regina, for enlightening us on the motivations of Filipino micro-entrepreneurs in engaging in e-commerce and how they overcome capacity, resource, and competition challenges through the help of their social networks, such as their family and friends, and also other means. No, as what you've mentioned, they have this make-do attitude, but of course, they need the support of the government and the private sector. In order for them to sustain and grow their business. And we can talk about the policy recommendations that you mentioned during the open forum. So if you have any questions for Regina, just type them in the chat, in the Q&A box. Okay. So friends from e-commerce, let's jump to financial inclusion, which is an important pathway for women's economic empowerment. And in this presentation, we'll look at the results of a study released by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. And we are honored to have with us Deputy Director Mynard Bryan Mojica of BSP's Policy Development Group Financial Inclusion Office. Director Mojica is involved in financial inclusion policy research and development work, particularly in inclusive digital finance, as well as agriculture and micro, small, and medium enterprise finance. He also manages the design and implementation of the data and measurement framework for financial inclusion. He holds a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in statistics from the University of the Philippines. Director Mojica, Deputy Director Mojica, sir, you now have the virtual floor.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning, everyone, and happy Women's Month. Thank you for this opportunity to share what we are doing to promote women's financial inclusion. Actually, in global discussions, the more encompassing term is gender inclusive financing, because we all know that gender is not only about women and men, right? And I'm also a new member of the BSP Gender Focal Point System, or the GFPS. And one of the learnings I got after attending the series of GOD trainings is that gender is a spectrum. But of course, in commemoration of the Women's Month, and next week is Women's Week, my presentation will focus on women and their access to financial products and services. I'd also like to extend my special thanks to my team here in BSP Financial Inclusion Office for helping me with the slides. So addressing the gender gaps in financial inclusion starts with collecting and analyzing sex disaggregated data. And my presentation actually is not a formal study or paper. The intention is to share with you the key results and insights of these surveys with gender lens, with the hope to increase awareness and stimulate interest among stakeholders, especially in the academe, researchers, and think tanks. So this will be the outline of my presentation. I'll start by providing some background on financial inclusion and providing some gender lens. And then I'll share the results and insights from two surveys with gender lens. One is conducted by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, the Financial Inclusion Survey that we do every 2 years. But actually starting this year, we're going to do this every year. And then the next one is a survey by the Asian Development Bank, but the BSP is also highly involved in this survey because we provided technical inputs in the implementation and analysis of this survey. Then I'll also share some of our other initiatives on gender inclusive financing and close with some ways moving forward. So in every presentation on financial inclusion, we always start with defining what financial inclusion is so that we're all on the same page. So just to share with you how we define financial inclusion, not only in the BSP, but this is on the national level because this is defined in the National Strategy for Financial Inclusion. It is a state wherein everyone has effective access to a wide range of financial products and services. So when we say effective access, it's not just about the proximity to the bank or the availability of the financial products and services, but it's also whether those products and services are useful, they're of good quality, and they are tailor-fitted to the needs of Filipinos. So this is not only limited to credit. You may know that BSP started its advocacy on microfinance, which is focused on microcredit for the micro entrepreneurs, but the success in microfinance have emboldened us to be more ambitious and to cover not just credit, but other products and services like savings, payment, remittance, insurance, and investment. And of course, since we're aiming for inclusion, we want all Filipinos to be included, including, of course, the barriers in terms of gender, age, other segments at a disadvantage, like persons with disabilities or people living in rural communities, among others. And why do we even bother about financial inclusion? Actually, it's not common for a central bank to have this development mandate, but we in the BSP see that we need to complement our mandates on price stability, financial stability, and efficient payments with financial inclusion. If I may share what the analogy of our governor, we're building a house with strong foundations, but no one is living inside. So basically, that's how we view inclusion. We need to ensure that everyone is benefiting and enjoying the advantages of having a strong and stable financial system. So first, why is it important? Financial products and services are tools that can help Filipinos and their families achieve their life aspirations and financial goals. If you would recall, in the ambition natin 2040, Filipinos aspire for a middle-class society with simple and comfortable life. For example, having their own house. But for many Filipinos, we cannot afford to buy a house on our own on a cash basis. We need, for example, a loan package that is suited to our cash flow, income stream, and financial capacity. So access to affordable housing, for example, will enable us to achieve this goal. And that's just a simple example of how access to financial services can help us achieve our aspirations. And inclusion is also not only about individuals and households, but especially with the two presentations earlier, the importance of the businesses, especially the micro, small, and medium enterprises or MSMEs. Financial products and services increase their productivity and competitiveness. And we see that the link really between financial inclusion and inclusive growth is through the productive sectors like agriculture and MSME because they generate jobs. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has also highlighted the need for resiliency building tools. And even before COVID, the climate change has also highlighted the need for resiliency building tools. So we need affordable insurance, for example, through microinsurance. And then for unexpected events like the pandemic, we need social protection schemes like unemployment insurance. And then on the macro level, financial inclusion can support inclusive growth and sustainable development. Financial inclusion is not an SDG, but it is recognized as an enabler of many of those 17 SDGs. Next slide. Now, let me now focus on the gender lens on why do we even bother now with women's financial inclusion. First is that women take a bigger chunk of their incomes to household consumption. And if we improve financial inclusion of women, it will help households avert poverty, recover from economic setbacks, and be resilient to disasters. In a traditional Filipino household, it is usually the wife who is in charge of budgeting and managing household finance, right? And many are saying that the wife is a better financial manager than the husband because the wife is wise in using the money because the funds are being used for utilities, for food, for education, for health. These are productive uses and welfare enhancing, as opposed to the husband who may have the tendency to use it for non-productive use cases like vices or gaming, for example. Of course, I don't want to generalize, but we know that somehow it's true in the Filipino setting. There have been studies in other countries, for example, of how financial inclusion help women. So in Bangladesh, women who receive wages directly to their account were able to increase their savings and also their ability to meet unexpected expenses. Now, we also see financial inclusion as a way to give women better access to financial services and enhance their know-how in managing financial resources to empower them. Basically, it's a way to empower them and to achieve independence. If I may quote a wording from the International Labor Organization, financial inclusion will not result in gender equality alone, or however, only with equal access to full range of financial services and with financial education also and consumer protection, do women stand a chance of social and economic empowerment. And third, narrowing the gender gap in financial inclusion could help in a country's economic development and growth, reduce income disparities, accelerate business evolution, and facilitate social inclusion. So basically, the idea is that with inclusion, it will provide women with the tools they need to accumulate assets, generate income, manage risk, and fully participate in the economy. Now, let's go with the next slide. So this is the national strategy for financial inclusion. And the good thing with the strategies now, it has a gender component because we have onboarded the Philippine Commission on Women as a member of the 21 21 members of the Interagency Financial Inclusion Steering Committee. And it is deliberate that we have a gender lens to the strategy. It was initially launched in 2015, and then we have a refresh and we launched it last year, early 2022. And in the monitoring and evaluation framework of the strategy, we have some indicators on gender, and these indicators are actually reflective of the gaps that we see based on data. For example, we're going to monitor the percentage of women-owned MSMEs with a loan in a formal financial institution. So take note that this is formal, not informal. And then we're going to compare that with the access of men-owned MSMEs. So we're going to measure the gap in access to formal credit. And then aside from credit, we also see gaps in other financial products and services, like, for example, investment. So let me now proceed with sharing with you the insights from the two surveys. First is with the 2021 Financial Inclusion Survey, or FIS. Just to give you a background about the survey, this is a small survey. We only have around 1,200 respondents, but the coverage is nationwide. We cover 15 years and old adults. There's an equal distribution between males and females to mimic the Philippine population. It was conducted actually in 2021 to 2022. I can still remember at the height of Omicron, we were in the final stages of data collection. Let me share with you now the key metrics that we derive from this survey. So the main indicator of financial inclusion is account ownership. So when I say account, this is not limited to a bank account. It can include an account in a cooperative or in a microfinance institution. And it can also include your accounts in e-money wallets. So for example, your GCash or Maya and the likes. So based on our survey, 56% of Filipino adults have a transaction account. And this is a significant improvement from 29% in 2019. So if there's one thing also that, a good impact of pandemic, if I may say, it's really because the digital shift, because the driver of this increase in account ownership we saw is the e-money. Now, if we disaggregate this into gender, we found out that there's a slightly higher account penetration among women at 57% versus 54% among men. And here you can also see the progress, the gender disaggregation starting from 2017, 2019, and then 2021. In 2017, there's a high account penetration among women. Women are twice likely as men to own an account. But over the years, actually, the gender gap is narrowing because men are catching up. And in 2021, there's only a 3 percentage point difference. And by the way, since this is a survey, we're able to address the double counting in the number of accounts. So if a person say that that person has a bank account and that person has an e-money wallet, for example, it will be counted as one. So it's different from the supply side data or administrative data that we have in BSV, which is subject to double counting. So again, in terms of drivers, it's really driven by the e-money accounts. It's an increase from 8% to 36%, and we saw no gender disparity in terms of e-money account ownership. An interesting finding is that for bank accounts, we find that it's more biased towards men, but for accounts in microfinance NGOs and cooperatives, these institutions are serving more women. And then in terms of purpose of account, we also noticed that there's a higher percentage of women using their account for savings, but for men, there's a higher percentage of them using the account for day-to-day payments. Next slide, please. Now, outside account ownership, we can also go about the other financial products and services. So there are more women with loans, but actually this is driven by microfinance institutions because in the Philippines, we have a thriving microfinance market. Many of the clients of microfinance institutions are the household-based women enterprises. There are also higher incidence of women with savings, but in terms of insurance and investment, we saw that women are at a disadvantage. In terms of digital finance at an individual level, we found out that there's slightly higher ownership of mobile phone and internet among women, 78% of them compared to 74% of women, and more or less equal usage in terms of using this internet and mobile phone for financial transactions. So just to clarify, this is at the individual level. So the second presentation that I have is on the MSME level. And an interesting finding that we saw is that at the individual level, it may appear that women are generally more financially included than men, but at the level of enterprises, many women-owned MSMEs are at a disadvantage. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of barriers to account ownership, so these are the reasons why people don't have an account. Of course, the number one reason is they don't have enough money, and we saw many women citing this, unbanked women citing this as a barrier than unbanked men. In terms of documentary requirements, it's equal. And then it seems that financial literacy, it's a less of a concern. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but it's a lower percentage of women citing awareness as a challenge in terms of account opening compared to men. And there's also this World Bank financial capability study that states that women also generally has a higher level of financial literacy than men. Although in the financial literacy portion of our survey, we found out that in 2021, there's not much significant difference between men and women in terms of financial literacy. And the general trend is that overall, there's a much leaves to be desired in terms of improving the financial literacy of Filipinos, because only 2% of Filipinos were able to answer 6 financial literacy questions correctly. Can go to the next slide. Okay, so those are some of the highlights of the financial inclusion survey. Let me now proceed with the insights from the ADB MSME Finance Survey. So this is also a small survey of 1,000 MSMEs. So ADB contracted the survey firm for this, and basically they follow the definition of MSMEs in the Magna Carta for MSMEs. And in terms of the definition of women-owned MSMEs, maybe some of our audience are asking, how do we define a women-owned MSME if it is not a sole proprietor? Of course, if it's a sole proprietor, it's easy to determine if it's a man or women-owned MSMEs. So for women-owned MSMEs, there's this World Bank definition set by IFC that it should be at least 51% women-owned, or at least 20%. If it's not at least 51% women-owned, it should be at least 20% women-owned with some parameters, like, for example, having at least one woman as CEO or COO or president, and having at least 30% of board composed of women. Next slide. So you can see here that many of the micro enterprises are women-owned. An overwhelming 45% of them are women-owned. And another finding is that many of these MSMEs are newly created and they are built from scratch. So for those micro enterprises, many of them are fully owned by women, 4 out of 5. And these are the sectors where we found many women-owned MSMEs: wholesale and retail, accommodation, manufacturing, and other service activities. Next slide. Now, in terms of the capital for the business, many of them, both men and women-owned MSMEs, just use their internal funds or savings as business capital. What's interesting here is the same finding that we saw from the FIS, that for banks, there's a higher percentage of men-owned MSMEs borrowing from banks as compared to a higher percentage of women-owned MSMEs borrowing from microfinance institutions and informal lenders. And in terms of business registration, we found out that there's also disparities because if it's in terms of barangay permit, more or less, both men and women-owned MSMEs have that. But for other registration permits like DTI or SEC, there are challenges for women-owned MSMEs in getting those permits. Next slide, please. Another finding that we have from these surveys that many MSMEs do not have that growth mindset at this point. Basically, their businesses are established out of necessity, and they view their business as an additional source of income. For men-owned MSMEs, after considering their business as a additional source of income, they want to be an entrepreneur, or somehow they have the growth mindset. But if you look at women-owned MSMEs, they establish their business because they want to be independent somehow, or also because of due to necessity. Next slide. Now, in terms of barrier to growth of the business, the main challenge they cited for their business growth is steep competition. And this is cited by both men and women-owned MSMEs. It's really about high competition and increasing market share. Now, access to finance is the second most cited barrier in terms of growth. And you will notice here that there are more women-owned MSMEs citing lack of financing capital as a challenge for their business at 58% compared to 37% among men-owned MSMEs. In terms of usage of digital financial services, and I think this finding is consistent with the first two presentations, there's less use of digital tools among MSMEs. So here, you can see usage of digital payments, electronic fund transfer, checking account, whether it's personal wallet and business account. By the way, another finding that we have is that for most MSMEs, they're just using their personal accounts or personal wallets for their business. They're not using a business account, which is a limitation for them because the individual account has some transaction limits. And we also saw that, as you can see here, there's lower adoption of these digital financial services or DFS among women-owned MSMEs. So in general, we found out that 44% of those men-owned MSMEs are using DFS as compared to only 28% of the women-owned MSMEs. Of course, the extent of use of DFS is also correlated to the size of the business. The medium enterprises are using more DFS rather compared to the micro enterprises at 19% only. And then you can also see here that there are more women preferring cash for financial transactions and less number of women using ATM terminals, using QR codes, and using internet banking via web browser and mobile banking apps. So now, aside from collecting disaggregated demand-side data, of course, with demand-side data, it's easy to disaggregate it by sex because we can get the sex at birth of the respondent. These are other policies that we have at present to promote gender-inclusive financing. So in terms of inclusive policies, we continue to promote microfinance in the banking sector. As you may know, BSP regulates banks with microfinance operations. And then a recent initiative is the Standard Business Loan Application Form, or SBLAP, wherein we mandated the use of a standard template, business loan template among banks and other covered entities. The idea is to make the loan application form simpler and borrower-friendly for MSMEs. And in the reporting requirement for this, we're going to get sex disaggregated data so that we will be able to monitor how many loans are approved or denied in terms disaggregated by sex. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a new member of the BSP Gender Focal Point System, and this is an opportunity for the Financial Inclusion Office to incorporate a financial inclusion perspective in the BSP GAD agenda, so that our GAD agenda is not only organization focused, meaning those activities targeting the employees only, but we also have activities that are client focused or for our stakeholders. And then we're also proud to share that the BSP has been recognized as an Gender Inclusive Finance Ambassador of the Alliance for Financial Inclusion, or AFI. This is a network of central banks working together to promote financial inclusion in recognition of the efforts of the central bank in mainstreaming gender inclusive financing in the Philippines. Now, for the ways forward, these are some of the proposed next steps that we can think of based on the results of the survey and available data. First is to streamline the definition of women-owned MSMEs because at present, there's really no established definition of women-owned MSMEs. The one that we use for the ADB surveys is from the World Bank definition, but there's this proposal from the PCW in coordination with the MSMED Council to adopt a formal definition of women-owned MSMEs because this can guide the succeeding efforts on women-owned MSMEs. Next is to enhance the data collection, especially on the supply side. So on the demand side, we have the data, but on the supply side, we need to enhance the data collection. So for example, the data of BSP on depositors, on borrowers. We have those data on a regular basis, on a more frequent basis. But at present, those are not yet sex disaggregated because, of course, we're also mindful of the implication of changing the reporting requirements on the compliance of our supervised financial institutions. This is also an opportunity to explore partnerships, to conduct in-depth studies on gender and financial inclusion. So the questions that I shared earlier, why are more men have bank accounts? Why is less number of women having insurance and investment? We have those observations, but to be honest, we don't have the reasons why. And we believe we need to have in-depth studies on this, and this can inform further policy studies on the part of the BSP. So the first 3 points are basically focused on policy research and data. The next 3 points are focused on engagement with the with the private sector, especially with the financial service providers. So we need to take advantage of the largely untapped women-owned MSME market by tailoring products and services to their needs and preferences. So in designing products and services, we need to take into account the realities of women. So for example, for those housewives that are living at home, the repayment behavior of the credit, for example, should take into account that women will not be able to go frequently to the branch because she is managing the business at home. She is also taking care of the children. So those realities should be taken into account in the product design. And then also, it's not just about financial products and services. We need to complement that with non-financial services like training and capacity building to add value to those financial products. And then the last part, this may sound cliche, but actually this is really way to go, is we really need to adopt a whole of society approach in promoting gender inclusive finance. And this brings me back to the National Strategy for Financial Inclusion, which will be our platform for multi-sectoral collaboration and harmonized approach to build a more inclusive financial sector that responds to the needs of all Filipinos, including women. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Director Mynard of the BSP, for sharing with us the results of your study on the financial inclusion of women. So as friends, as you can see, there are cross-cutting issues, cross-cutting challenges in terms of the economic and financial challenges confronting women that were revealed in the 3 studies. And we can unpack those results later in the open forum. But for now, we still have a fourth and last presentation. And this time we will look at another important issue, which is the safety of our transport environment for women and girls. If you will recall, Dr. Orbeta and his welcome message referenced the study commissioned by the Thomson Reuters Foundation, which revealed that Manila ranks 10th among cities in the world with the most dangerous transport systems for women. And our last presenter will dwell on that topic and how Filipino women are coping with it. Well, all of us, I think, all of us use transport systems. So I'm sure this presentation is something that we can all comprehend. So let us all welcome Dr. Hazel Biana, a professor of philosophy at the Salle University, Manila, and a research fellow of both the Southeast Asia Research Center and Hub and the Social Development Research Center. She is the current vice president of the Philosophical Association of the Philippines, and apart from being a recipient of a Hypatia Diversity Project grant in 2021, she recently completed a research grant on feminist artificial intelligence from the Center for Science, Technology, and Society in Chulalongkorn University in Thailand, and a research project on the AI empowered mobility of women with the support of a grant from the Alliance and the International Development Research Center. Her research interests are diverse and interdisciplinary, with topics on feminist philosophy, gender studies, the philosophy of place, and cultural criticism. Dr. Biana, Hazel, the floor is now yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sheila, for the introduction, and thank you so much to the PIDS for the invitation. I am very much honored to share our findings. So before I proceed, I just like to remind everyone that I am not a social scientist. Unlike our previous presenters, I am feminist philosopher. I would like to thank my team members for conducting this study with me, Dr. Homer Yabut, who's a psychologist, Dr. Habar, who is with the Behavioral Sciences Department, and Sari Domingo, who is an expert in gender and development. So hold on, let me just figure out how to share this. So before we begin, I'd also like to discuss that this project is a bigger part, is a small part of a big study about the role of artificial intelligence in the mobility of women. So basically, we got some help from the AEI Plus Alliance, which is based in Costa Rica, Thailand, and Switzerland, particularly funded by the Women at the Table, which ensures that women should be a part of participatory methods when it comes to decision making and, of course, in terms of policy making. So, and again, thank you so much for having me here. Okay, so here we go. So this study is basically motivated by the fact that, as mentioned earlier by Dr. Sarno, transport systems in Metro Manila are dangerous and unsafe for women. As mentioned also earlier, Manila is one of the cities, along with Mexico City, with the highest incidence of women experiencing sexual harassment in buses and in trains. So we have 80% and 90% of women who have experienced sexual harassment. Now, in terms of even bus stops and platform stops, women also experience the same in these platforms. But unfortunately, because they are transit captives, meaning they have no choice but to take public transportation, then they have to rely adequately, or rather they have to rely on these inadequate modes of transportation. Now, what we noticed as well is, in terms of urban planning, in terms of policy making, when it comes to transportation, women are not consulted, their needs, particularly when they take public transportation, how they take public transportation, it's not really taken into consideration, when we develop, systems. Now, unfortunately, because of this, indicators suggest of course, in new urban agenda, that women's safety are not promoted, when it comes to these systems. Okay, so what we wanted to do in this study is to look at, the environmental conditions, the risks of victimization, the levels of vulnerabilities, and transport infrastructure that revolves around the way that women use or, navigate urban transportation, at least in Metro Manila. So it's very important that we have to look at how women, how measures adhere to Manila's particular socio-spatial contexts. Now, of course, this is the reality, and we all know this, that it's severely traffic congested, in Metro Manila. In fact, it's even more densely populated than New York City, despite the fact that we have numerous transit systems, such as your trains, your buses, your PNR. You now have a ferry, such as your pedicabs, your angkas, and all these. They remain inadequate. Now, when it comes to pedestrian infrastructure, even if you just have to walk, probably half a mile or half a kilometer, it's really unsafe for you to do so. That's why some people choose to even ride jeepneys or pedicabs, even if it's just a short distance. Now, on top of that, we also have to deal with urban floods and other climate-related issues. So the task of the study was to collect data, to understand the nature of victimization and harassment and the experiences that women undergo, no? In order to inform appropriate gender mainstreaming policies. We also wanted to do in-depth investigations about women's needs and the issues they encounter while in transit. We also want to look at the way women act and interact with transport in local contexts, no? Especially in Metro Manila. So the empirical data that we wanted to gather from the study, of course, is basically hopefully, something that we could use as data to replicate later on in other Southeast Asian cities. Now, how did we do the study? No, so we basically got an ethics clearance first, and we did some consultations with women's groups. No? So it was important that our questionnaire, our protocol, had to undergo review first with certain women's groups, especially groups who cater to women survivors of violence. At the same time, we also contacted Women and Gender Studies associations for their inputs and to ensure that they are participating in the study as well as reviewers and as consultants. So we just basically did focus group discussions, and we did a limited ethnography and did an analysis. Now, just to inform everyone, we got informed consent from all the participants in the FGDs, and we made sure that there was a psychologist and a specialist present during the pre-screening test in order to monitor for distress of the transit crime survivors. So there was definitely a psychologist who was present during the conduct of the study, especially whenever sensitive topics were discussed. So we did a qualitative mixed method approach, and we did an FGD on 4 groups. So the first group was on adult women survivors of transit harassment or violence. Another group was on adult women who had no experience of transit violence in the past. They basically do their daily commutes in Metro Manila. They use various modes of transportation, such as jeepneys, trains, buses, and motorcycles. So it's either a combination or just one mode of transportation. Some of them even use pedicabs, tricycles, and the UV Express. So the next 2 FGDs, were conducted on transit authorities and traffic enforcers in Metro Manila. So some of them were jeepney drivers, some of them were bus drivers, and some of them were operators. So in terms of domains and variables, so in terms of perceptions, we wanted to look at their perception of risk, their perception of fear, the characterization of the survivors of harassment, how do they characterize the offenders, what are the norms about transport use, patterns, reasons for transport use, the weapons, if they use weapons, the AI-driven apps that they use to keep themselves safe, some of their recommendations on empowerment, and other recommendations on how to mitigate, if not eradicate, urban transit-related harassment and violence. In terms of their experience, we talked about being a witness or being someone who has experienced sexual harassment in transit, the location where the violence was committed, and in terms of practices, we looked at personal measures, how they protect themselves when it comes to violence, what are some of their empowerment practices, and their personal coping mechanisms after surviving such harassment. We also did ethnography. So we had 2 ethnographers, 1 male and 1 female, who spent a week observing women commuters in Metro Manila. So they looked at the high volume of women commuters, the general features of women commuters. We looked at how they did their commute in the morning, lunchtime, and night rush hours, the type of interactions in transit, the negative and positive disruptions, and passenger behaviors while waiting, boarding, riding, or alighting. So observations were done on jeepneys, buses, trains, and train stations. So we initially just had 1 ethnographer, but because of the input of one of our consultants, we realized that having 1 male ethnographer beats the purpose of having women participate in the study. So we had another female ethnographer do the limited ethnography as well. So in terms of the results, women think about when they're in transit, the first thing that they think about safety of being a commuter is looking after their personal belongings. So they also observe
how the operators and drivers manage the jeepneys or the buses. Being safe means being protected and defended by transport operators and being able to travel comfortably without having to worry about being harassed. No? So that's how they see, or that's how they define safety. In terms of the time of transit, obviously, this is quite obvious, no, but they believe that it's safer to travel at daytime versus nighttime. Okay, they believe that they should take extra care when they travel at night, no, because there's supposedly a prevalence of harassers, snatchers, pickpockets, robbers, and hold-uppers. Now, these are all based on perceptions and experiences and hearsay. Okay, so kwento-kwento sa kanila. In terms of the perception, they also hear this from the news. Okay, so it's word of mouth and from the news on TV or on the radio. No, but this is not based on actual data. Now, in terms of women, okay, women believe, no, that male offenders take advantage of female commuters because they are perceived to be weak. Okay, so we're not saying that women are weak per se. No, they just believe that they are being targeted because they are weak. So they believe that they tend to be targeted because they can, or they are stronger than them. Now, one participant argued that it's not because they actually look weak, no, but because we're women, no, not just because we're actually weak, but because we're women. Now, they also believe that intoxicated individuals are more prone to being offenders. Now, there was also some participants who claimed that they experienced intoxicated individuals who were, let off the jeepney. So how do they keep themselves safe? No, so some of them bring pepper spray. They avoid streets or paths that have few people. They make sure that they're always aware, they're vigilant, they're conscious about their surroundings. They try not to fall asleep in public vehicles. They don't use their cell phones. They don't bring out their wallets. They hold their bag in front of them. No, sometimes they hug their bags. They take photos of the cab plate number or they record it, and they inform their family members know where they are. They share their locations. They walk fast in dark areas. They try to walk in a zigzag pattern. They bring companions with them, so they're part of a buddy system. They don't even sit beside men who they don't know. They bring pocket scissors as a weapon. No, I don't know how they do this. No, bawal yan sa MRT. Okay, so they believe that perpetrators are scared of vigilant people. Now, they believe that empowered women ask for help if there are suspicious people. No, they confront their offenders head on. They embark on information campaigns on what to do. They talk back. They speak out. No, they call out offenders. So they also carry devices. No, for example, they voice activate Siri or Google speakers. No, so they say, "Hey, blank, call 911," for example. Okay. Now, when we did the FGDs on the authorities and the operators, they believe that women are empowered if there are equality on the road, no, and that people are aware of the VAUSI laws and the Bawal Bastos Law or the Safe Spaces Act, no. So they should also know self-defense. No? So these are the drivers saying that women passengers should know self-defense. They should bring their own weapons. If they cannot fight, no, they run, no, or they fly. Okay. So operators and drivers define transit safety as wearing of masks, constantly ensure, of course, the drivers themselves ensure that the brakes and the wheels are in excellent condition. They check out their passengers to make sure that they're always safe. They drop them off in safe places. And they take care of their personal belongings, such as cell phones and bags. No, if you've ever ridden the MRT, no, you'd always hear there's the driver announcing or the operator announcing that, bantayan natin mga belongings. No, let's be responsible for the stuff that we carry. So this was confirmed, no, by the drivers and the operators. And of course, drivers should not have a hangover or be taking drugs.
Now, in terms of observations, in the jeepney, no, most women are alone. Some of them are in groups. No, they would engage in certain conversations. They're more alert when they step out of the jeep. Some women have their bags slung over in front so they can cover their necklines. So when they step out of the jeep, no, they would cover their necklines. Then they would hurriedly walk, no, to the next jeepney. Excuse me. In terms of buses, it's the same thing. They would protect themselves from people who would try to look at their bodies. No, so when they step, they would pull down their skirts down as they exit the bus. They would hold their bags and their backpacks and in front of them. They would be attentive, no, and repeatedly scan their surroundings. In terms of trains, no, they would be texting before they would, while on the platform, they would be scrolling through their social media. They have their bags in front of them. Okay. Some of them are wiping, they would wipe sweat because of the excessive heat in the station. Some of them would use hand fans. And they would be prepared. And of course, they would make sure that their bags are zipped, and close to their bodies. Now, in terms of the types of violence experienced by women in Metro Manila, in transit, so it's divided into four. So verbal, sexual. Some people would have conversations with them about personal information, improper language, catcalling. Some of them would, say rape jokes. Some of them would whistle. Okay, non-verbal, sexual, staring, taking photos without consent, exhibitionism or indecent exposure, masturbation, sticking their tongue out, doing licking actions. Physical or sexual, no, they would sit too close, even if it's not crowded. And it's quite uncomfortable for the women. They would rub their body parts against another person, touching or hitting body parts, groping, putting the head on shoulder, pretending that it's accidental, even if it's not. In terms of non-sexual, grabbing of bags, stashing of bags, snatching of personal belongings, bags, and cell phones. Now, basically, what we noticed based on all these results is that women would take precautionary measures, such as avoiding dark areas. They would, really take care of their belongings and their bodies. And this is evidence, that women accept violence. They're resigned that this is normal. Okay, it's normalized, and that even if we can't say this categorically, they believe that men are predisposed to being perpetrators. So this has led, therefore, to women self-conditioning that they should be cautious whenever they take their public transportation. Okay, so we're not saying that all men are perpetrators, but women who travel tend to have this normalized fear that the men who are with them would harass them, even if it's not really the case. So they have conditioned themselves to avoid dangerous situations or to avoid men completely. Okay, so there's this chronic transit insecurity. So they believe that transit safety is their own sole responsibility, and they should always be careful. Okay, and because of this, sometimes they even blame themselves. That it's because of what they wear. Because they're wearing daring outfits. Okay, it's because they brought out their cell phone. They have an expensive cell phone. They're wearing expensive clothes. That's why they're targets. They became targets of thieves, snatchers, and harassers. Now, in terms of vigilance, they just believe that they have to be vigilant, to address the normalized and justified violence. Okay. So, what they do in order to be hyper vigilant is while walking or traveling alone, they would always make sure that their mental faculties are alert. They're not intoxicated. They would bring weapons. Some of them even have this personal safety alarm. It's called Bella, which flashes strobe lights and sounds a siren 130 decibels to scare off possible perpetrators. So others use women's safety apps to keep emergency alarms ready or to inform their friends and family of their whereabouts. Now, there's this study which was developed by Cash on defensive behaviors in transit. Okay. Now, what we did is we tried to categorize the certain actions of women in Manila using these categorizations. Okay, so in terms of temporal avoidance, some women would go home early. They would avoid late night or early morning travel. In terms of group travel, they would always bring or would prefer to have friends with them. In terms of physical, sexual, they would change the way that they walk. They would change their routes. They would always walk in amply lighted areas, and they would always be rushing. In terms of defensive positioning, they would not sit beside men. They would ride in designated women only train cars. So it's actually not normal to have a segregated train car. In more developed countries, for example, they don't have segregated train cars. So I think one of the other country that has segregated train cars would be India. Okay. In terms of defensive objects, they would bring weapons, safety alarms. They would voice activate, and they would use their bags. They use their bags actually as a weapon, as a defense material, to cover their bodies, or their hands, to cover their neckline or their legs. Okay. Now, what we noticed was there are some things that were not categorized by cash, like for example, asking for help, documenting transit activities, presenting themselves as assertive, or confident, staring back and calling out offenders, or doing real research, personal research about safety in transit. Now the question that we would like to pose, is this empowerment, or is this just merely defensive mechanism without being empowered? So the women mentioned that their vigilance and alertness is more of an empowerment mechanism, rather than a defensive behavior, because there is a proactivity, in being vigilant, or in taking care of oneself while in transit. They also mentioned knowledge, as something that empowers them. So being aware of your surroundings, it actually empowers them when they travel. So they do their actual homework about transit safety. So rather than being merely defensive, okay, they believe that they are proactive, and they are empowered. Okay, and projecting confidence, and strength is an expression of their power rather than their vulnerability. Now, this is based on the belief that potential male offenders will take advantage of female commuters who look weak and incapable of fighting back. Okay, so they would also call out, perpetrators, or they would, appear to be street smart in order to be not targets. Okay, they would immediately report unacceptable behavior to drivers and operators. And they would confront people who exhibit specific behaviors that appear to be harmful to women. So, we think that this is a type of modified feminist self-defense in order to prevent victimization in their everyday commutes. So, both women and transit authorities at the same time want to seek these empowering measures in terms of infrastructure and system adjustment. So it's not only the women. Now, there are two major approaches to feminist self-defense. So naming one, strengthening individual capacities and decreasing individual vulnerabilities, and instituting environmental modifications. Now, the previous slides illustrates number one. So how do we develop the defense skills of women and their psychological capacities when it comes to being mobile? And the second, based on their conversations with the women and operators, okay, they believe that there should be a lot of environmental modifications in transit, including police visibility, more roving patrollers, additional CCTVs, well-lit and commuter-friendly spaces. Okay, so just as a summary, women participants have shown modified and makeshift ways of defending themselves by carrying their weapons, in terms of psychological capacities, they've updated themselves about transit safety. They're well aware, they're vigilant, they're conscious, and they have their own safety systems in place. Now, I believe that this is based on a grounded political understanding of sexual violence and its relationship to other social and political phenomenon. So basically, the Filipino women already recognize, they know that there is inequality in transit, and they are targeted because they appear to be weak. Now, such awareness reflects the psychological skills that necessary for feminist self-defense, vocal resistance, calling out perpetrators, all of these are part and parcel of this modified feminist self-defense. So just as a conclusion and as a recommendation, because women have no choice but because they're transit captives, they have to find ways in order to keep themselves safe while they are in transit. We, however, still recommend metro-wide quantitative studies to verify these feminist and empowering actions and interactions in transit further. There's another study that we have also undertaken, wherein we did a survey about these socio-spatial contexts, which maybe in the future we can also share with you. That empowering women within the community could include the integration of these two approaches of feminist self-defense, both institutional and in policy-based systems. So while participants do not practice self-defense on a full-blown scale, they manage to get by every day by being empowered and street smart. Now, one suggestion, in order to not normalize violence, is perhaps instead of having a violence against women desk, which could be integrated to transport safety, is to have a women's empowerment desk instead, which reverses the bystander effect, wherein the normalization of sexual violence is addressed. So women should be empowered to ride the bus, rather than avoiding the bus or changing their routes. And this even goes as far as saying that we should push the harassers off the bus, in order to make transit spaces safer. Aside from adequate transit and security infrastructure, we believe that, women believe that they're empowered with certain resources, such as, in this case, weapons, for self-defense. Technology also plays a role in this, in access to information. And, of course, being updated and knowing the best routes. So in terms of the wish list, this is also my wish list. Of course, adequate transit and security infrastructure, technology-driven applications, access to information, and of course, immediate response from authorities in order to mitigate and eradicate violence against women in transit in Metro Manila. So just as an acknowledgement, this research would not have been possible without the support of the I+ Alliance and the aid of the International Development Research Center. So thank you very much.
And thank you very much too, Dr. Hazel, Biana. Well, I am sure many women in the audience can relate to your presentation, and at some point or from time to time have applied protection measures that your respondents mentioned whenever they travel. Well, indeed, we should not normalize violence and instead strive for safety and security for all, regardless of gender. So friends, I hope that you enjoyed our 4 very informative and interesting presentations. So we have come to the next part of our forum, which is the Q&A. But before I start reading the questions, I would like to inform you that we will again have our webinar raffle, and we will randomly select 3 winners from Zoom and Facebook, and each of them will receive a prize, and I will announce the winners of our raffle before we close the webinar. Okay, so let me check our Q&A, and I think there are 4 questions so far. 3 of them have been answered by our speakers, but let me ask them again, and this is for the benefit of those who are not able to see the answers and the questions on the Q&A box, and also for the benefit of our Facebook live stream viewers, because they can see the Q&A box from the live stream. Okay, and this first question is from Jennifer Joy Dumaraos, and this is addressed to our first set of presenters, Tong and Jean. Jennifer asks, were there distinct levels or characteristics of weaknesses mapped out on your study correlated to the risks and vulnerabilities of women sector beneficiaries of the government programs you covered? Case in point, she said, is the SWD, these Sustainable Livelihood Programs participants or beneficiaries, which is designed for the socioeconomic poor, and most of its beneficiaries are also women. Okay, Jean or Tong, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Sheila. No, I'll just echo the response given by Jean. The toolkit that we adopted actually enabled us to have a comprehensive examination of the policy landscape. If you revisit the study that we did, it covered a lot of areas, no? Specifically from data collection to trade finance, digital literacy, e-payments, discrimination, logistics, trade facilitation, so on and so forth. And the overwhelming finding that one of the findings that we were able to arrive at is that there are programs. No? There are a lot of programs, projects, and activities addressing the different concerns of women-led MSMEs. Although the focus is about women-led MSMEs and e-commerce, cross-border e-commerce, the study was able to gather and collect data from government stakeholders, from government agencies, business organizations, and other stakeholders regarding programs. And as the findings revealed to us, there's a lot of programs. Nevertheless, there are some gaps. There's some gaps that must be addressed. For example, many still, even though there are programs, many of the women-led MSMEs mention that they don't have any information. They have less access. They're not informed in terms of digital literacy. Infrastructure must still be improved, and a lot of other issues. No, and so if you want to have a deeper understanding or at least a more comprehensive understanding of what we have just shared, you may visit PIDS website and access our paper. Everything is in there. No, it is very extensive, and we saw that there's a lot of programs that may be, that may be combined to address overlaps and to attend to the specific needs of women-led MSMEs. While there's a bevy of programs, we recognize that there are still improvements to be made.
Thank you very much, Tom. So yes, government programs and even private sector have programs for women. These are existent, but it seems there's still gaps in terms of accessing these programs. Perhaps we can attribute this to lack of information, lack of awareness, and even the knowledge on how to access this. And also we have also seen in the case of the second presentation that there are still obstacles, and even in the third presentation when it comes to financial inclusion, which, as we all know, is also related. Financially inclusive women can better participate in the economy because they have the means, they have the resources to engage in business. So on that note, let me jump to the second question, and this one is for the second study from Sixto Donato Macazaet. He said, it seems to me that the problems cited are problems not only of women in micro-entrepreneurs, but of all micro-entrepreneurs regardless of sex. Regina wants to know if this perception is correct, and what would be the problems of women entrepreneurs that are not problems of male entrepreneurs. I know you've answered this already in the Q&A box, but for the benefit of our audience, please, can you again answer this question?
Yes, po. Thank you, Dr. Shar, and thank you also to Sir Sixto for that question. So yes, that is correct. from what we have gathered, the issues that women entrepreneurs mentioned when we conducted the survey. So the challenges they face are more on the economic barriers like tight market competition, slow internet connectivity. There are also I think personal or psychological issues as well, because they also face cyberbullying because they deal with trolls, haters, and the like. So I think it could be observed there that they in a way the problems that they have faced has shifted to more on the economic barriers, since what we're talking is e-commerce or their participation in e-commerce, which I think is a probable step towards gender equity. But also thank you for answering as well, Miss Jean Carlos, for adding like other possible gender-based issues that they are facing, particularly of women MSMEs. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. For our third, well, this is not a question, but a comment from Pamela Susara. And this is about the presentation of Director Mynard on financial inclusion. And as we've heard from him, we've seen that women are still at a disadvantage when it comes to, accessing loans for their businesses. Banks are still not receptive to them, and in fact, their main source for loans for their businesses are still the microcredit firms and not banks. So there's still a lack of financing capital, and Director Mynard has mentioned this in his presentation. And one of our participants have this mentioned a comment. No, he said that there may be a need to revisit bank policies on their requirements on opening accounts. She added that she has witnessed several circumstances that bank turned down possible clients who are women due to unavailability of a landline number. Minor as it is, this contributes to exclusion of certain groups in terms of accessing financial instruments. Director Mynard, you may have something to say about this comment, please.
Yes. Actually, our regulations po on onboarding, so the Know Your Customer or the KYC rules, require that the banks and our supervised financial institutions to have procedures that will ensure that the financially or the socially disadvantaged are not discriminated or denied access to financial services. We recognize that there are these realities that are happening on the ground, and if these cases are validated, this can be part of, for example, of audit findings or observations on the financial institution, since they are not complying with the relevant rules on KYC, but not only on KYC, but also, for example, on financial consumer protection. So we have this complaints assistance mechanism through our we have the BSP chatbot or BSP online body. So if ever for those people who will encounter similar experience, you can lodge the complaint to BSP if your financial institution has not adequately addressed your concern or resolved the issue.
And it's very good to hear, Director Mynard. Have you been receiving a lot of complaints from customers regarding, discrimination faced by not just women, but low income individuals who would like to access loans from banks, but due to the many requirements from banks, they are being turned away?
Yeah, unfortunately, ma'am, I don't have readily available data, but we can extract it because we have the Consumer Empowerment and Market Conduct Office who has the database of the complaints. But based on the information that I know, we also receive similar complaints, for example, from other marginalized segments like persons with disabilities having challenges in opening an account. but to what extent is this compared to the whole complaints database? Something that I need to check. One general trend that we saw from the pandemic is that because of the shift to digital financial transactions, a lot of the complaints are related to digital financial transactions. For example, unauthorized transactions, frauds, and scams.
Thank you very much, Director Mynard. And we have two questions here from Juan Consigna for Dr. Biana. Okay, the first question is there any data, whether from your study or elsewhere, that describe the commuting experience of Filipino transgender women and masculine presenting women?
Thank you for that question. We have conducted a quantitative study on women and those who identify as women just last year as well. So we had 400 respondents. We have not yet analyzed the data of that, but yes, we have an existing study on that. In 2016, however, I posted the link in the Q&A. There was this study done on Filipino transgendered individuals' experiences in the MRT. So yes, there have been existing studies, but there are not a lot. So it's something that should be explored as well.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Biana. We have a follow-up question, and this time, Vaughn asked if the government has long-term action plans regarding the issue. While he said, while we acknowledge protections that exist, wouldn't be much better if the government takes the burden away from women and instead shift the responsibility to the perpetrators of harassment? Well, we have existing legislation such as the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act, anti-rape law. We also have anti-violence against women and children. But ang ano nga dito kung nai-implement ba talaga yung batas at kung monitor and kung uniform or consistent ba yung implementation ng mga batas na ito. Dr. Biana, your input, please.
Yes, I agree with Dr. Shar, and I agree with the person who asked the question. Yeah, it's a question of really implementation and integration. Do we integrate? I'm aware that I think the Commission on Human Rights is conducting is going to conduct a study on transportation and violence, particularly on women. So hopefully, that can also contribute to further policy development and policy implementation. So there are a lot of research that's being done. So yes, I agree. The question is in terms of policy that already exists, are they being integrated fully? Do they actually address the needs of women? So yes, we need to find out more about those things. But yeah, I guess that's really the motivation, or rather, that's really the finding of the study. Considering that the infrastructure, it's not there. So women just take it upon
That's
themselves.
right, yeah.
Even if it's there, it's not being implemented in terms of respond. The first responders, they don't respond immediately. So anong gagawin natin, di ba? What are women
That's
going
right.
to do? Yeah.
And what you said about what you said about normalized violence, that we just accept that violence is an immutable part of life. Hindi dapat ganon. Okay. We still have some interesting questions here, and this one is for you again. Okay, from Jonathan Florendo. You mentioned that in countries like the Philippines and India, it is dangerous for women to commute. Is there an indicator in the study you conducted that the economic status of a country is a factor in this kind of culture?
Well, based on my study, since it's just on Metro Manila, I cannot conclude that. However, as part of the SGDs, transport inclusivity is one of the indicators of that. However, I've also done some research on, for example, other more developed transportation systems, and it's still the case. For example, women in New York, women in London, they are still also sexually harassed. So it happens all over the world, but I'm not sure if it's just worse here in Metro Manila, considering the social spatial context that we have, that we are more congested, that we have poor pedestrian infrastructure, and all these other factors.
We hope that our audience, those researchers and students watching us, these the topics that we covered today will serve as an inspiration for your motivation to conduct your own studies related to this, so we can have more, in terms of knowledge generation, we can have more research on these topics that can help inform our policymakers. Okay, there's another question here, and this is also for you, Dr. Biana, from Dennis Florence Bragas. Laws in the Philippines, such as the VAUSI, tend to protect women than men. There was a petition questioning the constitutionality of the VAUSI law on the ground of equal protection under the Bill of Rights. The court reasoned out that women are more victims of crimes. Is this in your opinion, is this a manifestation on the part of legislators that women are weak?
I think it's just a recognition of the vulnerability of women and children. But as part of one of our suggestions, we would like to focus on the empowerment rather than the violence itself. So I don't know if that's going to address the concern that women are naturalized or normalized as vulnerable. But that's one of our recommendations. It's changing the game. It's reversing the bystander effect. Rather than calling it a violence against women law, should it be referred to as an empowerment law, or as what we usually term as a capacity building law? So that's something that we might want to think about.
Okay. For our last question, okay, we have one here from Raymond Pinion. What is the word disadvantage? Why is the word disadvantage used when statistics on access to financial instruments show numbers for women are lesser compared to men, and not true for the reverse? Is this now the mandated politically correct term to use in official government conversation? And Director Mynard, you may want to answer this question, please.
Yeah. Actually, there's no mandate po to use it in official government conversation. And actually, in my presentation, it's just my personal preference to use the word that the women are at a disadvantage. And in our financial inclusion office, that's the word we use to refer to those segments who are underserved or unserved. And this is not specific to women, but to other underserved and unserved segments, like, for example, youth, persons with disabilities, indigenous Filipinos, those living in remote areas. So other segments that we believe are underserved or unserved in terms of access to financial services.
Okay, thank you very much, Director Mynard. And another, okay, this will be our last question for the open forum, because we still have no time left. What is your definition of equity? Is it equality of outcomes or equality of opportunities? Anyone who would like to answer this question? I saw Jovito nodding his head. Tom, would you like to take a crack at this? And then I can also ask Jean and Dr. Hazel.
Yeah, well, for me, equity is focused more on the equality of outcomes. It's basically recognizing the fact that everyone are not on the same, they're not given the same opportunities. So it's basically drawing back to the point that that everyone made. It's trying to come up with policies that are not one size fits all, but that are tailor fit to the needs and the demands of each groups of women, because we have to recognize that even though women is characterized as a sector, there are different subsectors or different groups of women that face different issues or challenges. This is apparent in the case of e-commerce, in the case of transport, and even in the case of financial access to finance. And so I think there's a need to promote equity But let us not forget that we cannot arrive at equity if we don't have equality, meaning resources being available made to them. So for me, equity is about equality of outcomes and recognizing the different scenarios or predicaments or factors affecting the situation of different groups of women.
Thank you very much, Tong. Anyone would like to contribute to this question? Okay, Jean, please. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Sheila and Tong. So, in contrary or in addition to the point of view of Tong, for me, equity could be traced in opportunities. For example, as I added to the question addressed to Regina earlier, everything could be traced to the gender stereotypes and gender roles. So, I mentioned on my presentation that there is still what did I say earlier? There's still the one size fits all policy cannot be recommended for the case of women-led MSMEs e-commerce, because we need to acknowledge that women face different challenges and different they have certain gender stereotypes. For example, in the case of women-led MSMEs, they have multiple burdens. That's why they chose to have an MSME, so they could both have do their reproductive, like such as work at home. At the same time, they could also earn money. That's what we call productive work. So I think we need to address first the opportunities for women so they could do both. Like that's why we encourage women with multiple burdens to do MSMEs. So I think Dr. Hazel has like more capacity to answer this because she's a feminist thinker. So that's my point of view, Dr. Sheila. It's more of an opportunity based for me.
Thank you very much, Jean. Dr. Hazel, may you please?
Yes, I'd like to think of gender equity in terms of justice. So given that given the opportunities that are available to everyone, is it justified just to offer this amount of opportunity to a certain segment, considering that there is a need for more? So yeah, I think that's an easier way of thinking about equity, at least in the way that I would try to explain it to myself or try to understand it. The opportunities that are given to someone, for example, to the more vulnerable groups, should be consistent with their needs. I think it's easier to look at it from the perspective of social class. No, so you give more quote unquote ayuda to those who need it as opposed to those who do not. So when we look at it in terms of gender, what rights, what opportunities do we provide to a certain gender group, considering that they have a lack or they have a need of these certain rights and opportunities. So yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Biana. And Regina and Director Mynard, would you have anything to add? Feel free to, yes?
Maybe in the context of financial services.
Financial services, yes,
on the
please.
equity. Well, for me, equity recognizes that in relation also to the example of, for example, DSWD Pantawid Pamilya, equity recognizes that the support needed should be commensurate or proportionate to the needs of that specific sector. For example, in financial inclusion, it's possible that we give equal access to financial services, but in the end, there's still lower level of inclusion for women despite the equal access provided. So sometimes gender equality may not be enough. If there is a persistent gap or challenge, it can be gender intentional, for example.
Thank you, Director Mynard. And Regina?
Yes, I actually echo the sentiments of everyone. But maybe to add then po, we seek as a gender equity also not just more on the outcomes and opportunities side, but also in terms of treatment. But this will not be possible if again if wala nga pong walang equal opportunities for everyone, or especially tailor-fitted opportunities for women, kasi we have different issues then na face.
Thank you very much, Regina. Well, what an interesting discussion we just had. And to cap took up our conversation, may I ask our speakers from for some brief parting words, if they have any. Let's start with Jean and Tong, then Regina, Director Mynard, and Hazel. Please.
Tong, go ahead, please.
Well, parting words, I'd actually rather my parting words is listen to women. No, that's basically it. Women have a lot more to say, mainly because, as mentioned by Jean, they have been subjected to gender stereotypes, which prompt them to do different roles at the same time. And as we see an environment that hopefully caters to, greater participation and greater equity among different, not only sexes but different genders, we the main, I think the main important thing that we must always aspire for is an open line of communication and dialogue between and among different stakeholders. I think that's the best way to do about it. And the last point is policies should be empirical. They should be data-based. They should be supported by what's happening on the ground. Okay? And the last is you may design a lot of beautiful policies, but if it is not properly implemented, then it would go to waste. So I think those are the three things. Listen to women, implement policies, and the second one was I forgot what I just mentioned, but but I think it's about I forgot about it. No, but those are the three parting words.
Thank you very much, Tong. Jean, would you have anything to add? Yes, please.
Dr. Sheila, I will just like to highlight the issue of informality among the women-led MSMEs. So we highlighted that there are like extensive programs and laws for the women. However, they face the rampancy of informality among the sector. So that's why they cannot access, or they don't have any know-how how to access the government programs, and as well as the programs implemented by the private sector. So I think it's really important to focus on how to encourage those women to formalize, but at the same time, we need to acknowledge that not everyone could formalize their businesses. Ayun lang po yung gusto kong highlight.
Yes, actually, that's a very important issue. Thank you for bringing that up. Unfortunately, we're not able to cover that in the open forum, but you're right. The high level of informality of women MSMEs, that's very important to tackle, and hopefully through our government programs and also through the support of the private sector, we can address that issue. Okay, because it also impacts on the security, the social security of women. Though, I mean, if there is a high level of informality, that also impacts on the benefits, the pension, because they are not part of the formal labor market. Okay, at this point, let me call on Regina. Regina, any brief parting words?
Yes, but for me, I think Filipino women entrepreneurs have huge potential to thrive in terms of entrepreneurship, particularly in the digital economy. So, so from my presentation a while ago, making do, or the behavior of bricolage should, I mean, they shouldn't stop there, but the government should have should help or assist women-led MSMEs to upscale, and especially what Ms. Jean mentioned, help them progress to formal approaches. But again, there are, like what Ma'am Jean said, there are MSMEs that cannot be or cannot informal can stay, or maybe in the informal sector for the meantime. So yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Regina. And let's go to Director Mynard of the BSP. Any parting words, sir?
For me, one of the main takeaways really is on the digitalization, on how it can bring also a digital divide between men and women owning MSMEs, for example. So the note to self and to our office is to address those gaps in terms of access to digital financial services. And let's turn digitalization not as a digital divider, but an equalizer. So we use those digital products and services not only to achieve efficiencies, but to balance the gender gap in financial inclusion.
Thank you very much, Director Mynard. And of course, Dr. Hazel?
Yes, I guess very briefly, inadequate transportation is a barrier to women's inclusivity. It's also a hindrance to the socioeconomic development of the country. So we should continuously look at it more closely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much to all our guests. Friends, please join me in thanking them through a big virtual clap. And we hope that today's discussion has given you a better understanding of the economic, social, financial, and security issues that limit women's full participation in society and restrict their ability to have an enjoyable and productive life. Well, let's aim and work together for an equitable, inclusive, and safe world for everyone. As PIDS President Orbeta said at the beginning of our forum, women empowerment and closing the gender gap should be pursued by everyone regardless of gender. And here are the winners of our webinar raffle. We have Sarika Pendatun, Israel Camacho, and Jonathan Florendo. Sarika, Israel, and Jonathan, our webinar team will get in touch with you for your prize. Congratulations. And finally, we have some reminders. You can access all the presentations from today's webinar on the PIDS website. Also, please answer the feedback survey that will pop on your screen after this webinar. Your comments are important to us to improve our virtual events. And also, please regularly visit our website and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. PIDS and SERP-P have their respective websites and social media accounts. And we also have a YouTube channel where you can access the recordings of all PIDS events. We have 2 more webinars this month. On March 16, from 2 to 4:30 p.m., we will have the virtual launch of the newest book of PIDS entitled How Modern is Philippine Agriculture and Fisheries. Then on March 23rd, we will have a hybrid forum on maximizing social impact, the power of data in public policy. It's from 3 to 5 p.m. and you may join the discussion on Zoom. PIDS is co-organizing that event with ID Insight, Ateneo School of Government, and Ateneo Policy Center. Okay, and finally, we would like to acknowledge the various organizations from the government, academia, civil society, business, and international development community. Also, our friends from the media that join us today. This concludes our virtual policy forum. Again, our sincerest thanks to our partners in the SERP-P network for the continued support, and to all our guests and participants on Zoom and Facebook for your active participation. We hope to see you again in our next events. Maraming salamat po at isang makabuluhang pagdiriwang ng buwan ng kababaihan sa ating lahat.